Okay, recording now. So I had you decide between the risky private investment and the safe government bond investment. And I designed the experiment in such a way that I think which models real life. The more people who invest in the government bond, the higher the price. And one way to think of that is just because it's like an auction. Imagine you're at an auction with just one person bidding. You're gonna get the you're the person bidding. You're the only one. You're gonna get that thing for real cheap. That'd be great for you to show up at an auction and you're the only one that's doing any bidding. Whereas if you go to an auction and there's 100 people all bidding and the price just keeps going up and up, you're not going to get a very good deal. You may actually still buy some of the stuff, but you're not going to get you're going to have to pay a much higher price. And so when we're talking about bonds, the higher the price, the lower the yield. That's because the bond pays a fixed amount, let's say $100. And if the price is above $99, let's say, you're not going to get a lot of interest. The yield is what is the difference between, it's usually percentage that you earn in interest. Okay, so I designed the game that way so that more of you who buy bonds, the lower the yield. And then, also I had this feature that the higher the government debt, the more bonds were needed, the more bonds were being sold, which means the higher the yield. Why is that? I mean, once again, think about the auction. If you and a bunch of people are somewhere trying to buy stuff at an auction, if there's more things that you can buy, like if there's just one item, everybody wants this one item, they're going to bid maybe pretty aggressively for it because they have to get that one item. Where if there's 100 of these things and people don't really care which one they get, they just want to get one of the 100 things, they don't have to bid very aggressively to get it. The idea there is that the more bonds are available, the less aggressive the bidding is, and in fact, the lower the price, which means the higher the yield. So I put that into the game too. The government debt, all else equal, increases the yield on government bonds. But of course, it wasn't all else equal, because what happened when the government debt went up? More of you decided you wanted the bonds. That's exactly what I wanted to happen. There was one time that it didn't happen. Let's look at the results. I think we're ready to. I would have loved to talk about these results right after we did this experiment, but the class periods are so short. I didn't have time. Look at Excel. Okay, this is the results here. On this axis, on the x-axis is the debt, which was, the term is exogenous. Exogenous was debt, which means it wasn't part of the game. It wasn't part of our model. Debt was just changed arbitrarily by me. And in fact, it went up. It started at, you can see over here, this is round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we did 5 rounds of this game. Started with a debt of 100, then 150, then 200, 300, then 500. Every round, the debt went up, which kind of like real life, that's happening, right? The debt goes up every year, sometimes significantly up. It hasn't quintupled exactly over the span of 4 years, but 5 years. But it is growing at a pretty alarming rate. Okay, what happened? What's this other variable? This is the percent of your collectively how much you invested in bonds, in the safe bonds. Notice how it didn't change between rounds 2 and 3, but every other time it went up. Here's a graph of that. You can see there's this positive relationship between these blue dots, and so this, I wish I should have labeled these axes. Didn't have time. This is bond. This is debt on this axis and bond investment percentage on this axis. There's a positive relationship. That's what we would expect. So who cares? Okay, so bonds become more attractive when government debt goes up, and so more people buy bonds. What's the problem with that? Actually, do you guys have any idea? Like, what am I going to say about the problem with that? What's wrong with, let's say all of the hedge fund managers in the game that we played, what if they all just put 100% of their funds in terms of the government bonds? Who cares? What's wrong with that? Does anybody have anything you can guess in the chat? I say guess as if you're going to be wrong. No, you could be correct. Give an informed opinion. The bonds wouldn't be worth very much in terms of yield. That's true. That's true because the more people put in. So is that the only bad thing? So what? So a bunch of hedge fund managers aren't generating as much. Ooh, someone's trying to get in now. A bunch of hedge fund managers are not generating as much yield for their clients as otherwise. So what? Can I sidebar right now? I, there's something important that I left out of this game in terms of thinking of profits and how successful people are in this game. Like if you're a hedge fund manager and you're looking at how much money did you earn, there's one thing that I left out of the game that would really cast some doubt on how well you're actually doing. You want me to guess, or should I just tell you? What I have in mind is inflation. And if you think about it, if you're generating a return on your investment, but it's not greater than the return of the rate of inflation, are you actually doing good? Are you doing a good job for your investors? The answer is no, right? If you generate a return of like 2%, but the interest rate is 4%, that's not good, because in real terms, the money has decreased in value. So I apologize. I did not make a complex, and I thought the game was complex enough as it is. I didn't include this extra level of complexity, which is inflation. And maybe not this week, but next week we will talk more about inflation and in terms of a policy, like how good is this for everybody? How good is the situation that we find ourselves in? If, like, let's say these returns go way up and up and up, but they're not going up with respect to inflation, then it doesn't help it doesn't help the investor. Here's what I'm saying: a rate of return of 2% when inflation is 2% is just as good as a rate of return of 4% when inflation is 4%. And economists use this. The word is real. The real rate of return is not just what it takes inflation into account. So it's usually divided by something that's inflation. Okay, so even though I didn't have inflation in this game, I think I still got some results that I wanted. That you guys increased your bond investment when debt went up. And then I asked this question: why would that be bad? And then Colin says the bonds wouldn't be worth very much in terms of yield. That's true. But in terms of efficiency to the economy, I don't really care that much about that. It means, okay, it means you're not. Oh, okay. I have another point to make. Actually, government bonds being cheap, isn't that a good thing? What do we think? Why is it good for us, the people in the United States, if the rate of return of bonds is low? Anybody think of an idea for that? Do you understand my question? Why? Give me just one reason. Why would it be good for the U.S. to have a low yield on government bonds? I think there's an answer to this. It's not too hard. If you have something in mind, you're thinking, is it that? That's too simple. That can't be right. No, I think could be right. I think this is, and actually, I think this is bad if nobody knows. Nobody can give an answer to this question. I think it means there are some aspects of government debt that I haven't explained very well, or haven't come through very well. This is kind of important. guesses? Would private money supply to firms be suppressed with too high a yield? That's a pretty sophisticated answer, and I will say yes. I was looking for a simpler one than that, but yes. Good. You guys see what Nick wrote? I want to highlight his answer because it's a good answer. He says private money supply. I think what he means. I understand what he means by that. I think he means loanable funds in the private market. And so not the government bond market. There's a separate market. There's a lot of substitutability between the two, but you could imagine there's a separate market for private loanable funds or money, as he says, and that supply would be suppressed. What does he mean by that? He actually means the supply curve would shift to the left. Hopefully you guys have had enough training with supply and demand to know, just picture in your mind, two axes, a supply curve, a demand curve. Oops, I did that backwards. And this concept that these curves, you can move along the curves. Moving along the curves happens when the price changes, when the y-axis changes. You're just moving along the curves. But you can also shift the curves. It's remarkable how far this concept will get you. If you understand anything from microeconomics, you just have in your head a picture of two axes, a supply curve, a demand curve. The fact that when things change, there could be a movement along the curve, or there could be a shifting of the curve. That concept gets you so much intuition for all these different sorts of economic problems, like labor and minimum wage and health insurance and everything that we could talk about. If you just have that in your mind, it helps. Okay, so going back to Nick's comment, what he said was money supply would be suppressed with too high of yield. I agree. That what he's really saying is the supply curve for loanable funds in the market for private investment would shift to the left. I agree. I mean, he hasn't said why that would be bad. So I actually want to talk about this today. So the name of this effect it's called crowding out private investment. So I want us to know this term. Thanks, Nick. Maybe you read my slides and you knew what I was going to be talking about today. So you're like, oh, I'm going to say it before the professor does, and then I'll seem really smart. But you're correct. Even though there was a simpler answer I wanted, but the more complex answer is good too. Imagine the supply curve shifting to the left because you might not, sorry. I wanted to talk about, can everybody see me? I should stop sharing so that we're like looking at each other. This is more of like a discussion we're having where I'm the only one whose camera is on, but I see the first digit of your names, and I'm talking to these black boxes with your names in them. That's my job. That's what I do for a living. I talk to every once in a while the black boxes talk back to me, but mostly it's just the black boxes. Okay, so here is the reason. Let's go. Yeah, here's the reason why what Nick said made sense. I said before, this is like shifting the supply curve to the left. Why does the supply curve shift to the left? Why is it a shift and not just moving along the curve? You know, you can move along the curve up and down, left and right. That happens all the time too. But this is more than that. This would be a shift. Why? Let's talk about that. I mean, the whole concept of supply and demand and how to use supply and demand doesn't work unless you also understand why things are shifting. Why does the supply curve shift? Does anybody want to try this? Try to answer that. Do you understand my question? I'll type out the question. Why does the supply of loanable funds in the private this is a lot of words. I have to type it out though to make my question specific. I have to type it out. Why does the supply of loanable funds in the private investment market shift to the, let me make sure I got this right, left when the yield on government bonds is high? This is a, it took me 3 lines of chat just to even ask this question. So it's okay if you don't have a great answer for it right away. But if somebody's willing to just try to answer, I would appreciate it. Because interest is low. Okay, there's a higher demand for a higher yield investment. Okay. Sort of. Do you want to elaborate on either Emmanuel or Ryan? Do you want to try to elaborate? Less money in the private sector as it's shifted to the public. I think that's a better answer. Yeah, I like that answer, Colin. Less money, but remember the game. Remember the game of hedge fund manager that I had you play. It's not that you can't invest in the private market. You still can. Whatever opportunity was there before, it's still there. The difference is your incentives have changed. If you're a hedge fund manager, why did you guys, when you were playing the game, why were you buying more of the bonds and less of the private investment when the debt went up? It wasn't that you couldn't earn just as much money in the private market. You can in fact earn all the way up to 40, whatever that was, 40 units. But still, people, since bonds are safer, most invest in that, leaving good. Yes, that's right. That's right. So I guess, how would I answer it? Colin Trias, good answer. I would say it shifts to the left because who do you call the people who have this money? Investors. Let's call them investors, because investors will choose to supply money in the bond market, and therefore that money is not available in the private market, which is a shift of quantity, right? It's not a shift of price. You can imagine price on the vertical, quantity on the y-axis. It's actually just for a given price, there's less quantity available to be supplied. That's the definition of a shift. The supply curve shifts to the left because fixing the price, that's kind of important too, because the price isn't changing right now. We're not thinking of a change in price. We're thinking of, if you had fixed the price. Maybe I should draw this, in a whiteboard. Let me just try. I don't have a great whiteboard, but let me just share this. Where is it? Here we go. The chat is in the way. Over here. If we have, that's a supply and demand curve. Here's what I'm saying. Like if you fix, okay, I'll choose what's close to the equilibrium. If you fix this price, and now we're talking about how do things change when the government bond yield goes up because of the incentives that we worked on last class. And I think you all realize, it's like, I just don't want to take that risk in the private investment. Why should I take a risk when I can get a pretty good deal with something that's perfectly safe or almost perfectly safe? And therefore, given the same price, or, instead of price, now we should think of this as rate, interest rate or yield, and this is quantity. Given the same price, I would choose a smaller amount of quantity to invest. And that's actually true at any price. It's like a shift this way at all prices.
At the same time.
What's that? I couldn't understand you if you said something. So like, let me do a new color, like, okay, fine, red. You know, this, that's right. So this is the supply one, and this is supply two, and this is demand. So what I've drawn for you kind of poorly is the market for loanable funds in the private investment market. S1 is where the debt is low. S1 is where the debt is low. S2 is where the debt is high. Okay, so we're going from low debt to high debt. And the reason for the shift is the whole reason I gave you that exercise to do on Monday. The whole point of that game was to have it happen naturally, that you guys as investors who are just trying to earn the most you can in the world, when you see that higher government bond yield rate, it's tempting. You're like, ooh, I want some of that. And that means you're just, because whatever's left over is what goes in the private market. That supply has shifted to the left because it's just simply less of it is available. And I think that answers the question. I think that answers my question of why does the supply of loanable, of course, you guys, if I ask you this on a quiz, something, I don't expect you to draw. I don't even know how that would be feasible for you to draw it in Blackboard, you know, make a little Microsoft Paint thing and submit that. No, I don't want that. I would much rather you just be able to describe it in words as best you can. Why does the supply of loanable funds in the private investment market shift to the left when the yield on government bonds is high? It's because for any given price or any rate, see how price and rate are the same thing here. We should think of it as, I take it back. Let's think of it as a rate rather than a price. For any given rate of return in the private market, less funds are available. So the quantity has decreased. That's a shift to the left. You don't have to draw this, but this is the fact. This is called crowding out of private investment. That's one way to call this this term. There's less money available. The rates go up a little bit. You can kind of see that if this were the first rate, if this were they call that R1, then what happens to the new rate? It goes. This is very difficult to do. R2. I wish I was in real life with you guys with a real whiteboard, but I'm not. Do you guys have any questions about this drawing? I actually have a better drawing of it in my slides. But this is the more, oh wow, it's already 10:30. We gotta start talking about taxes. Okay, I think I want to be done with this. We may come back to it later, but right now we gotta switch to talking about taxes. Okay. What? I can't understand you. If you said something, I'm sorry, I didn't understand it. Let's talk about taxes. Okay, what I have on the screen now is basically a description of some of the main points. Why can't I enable editing? Weird. There we go. Slideshow from current slide. Of the Republican tax plan of 2017. It was actually passed right at the end of 2017. It didn't take effect till 2018, and it didn't affect our taxes until 2019, I think. It affected the taxes from the year of 2018, which you didn't actually have to pay, or at least you didn't have to file your tax return until 2019. But, and then we had to do it again in 2020. So there's been 2 years of tax returns that have already had this new plan in them. But you know, why did the Republicans do this? And anybody have some reasons why they did it? We're going to debate this on Friday, but just maybe just read some of the dots that I put here. It did reduce the tax rates for businesses and individuals almost across the board. People had to pay lower taxes. increasing a standard deduction. You guys know the difference between these like standard deductions and other deductions? Some of you maybe haven't paid your taxes very many times in your life, but one of the things that the plan did was simplify taxes. But by simplifying the taxes, they actually took away some other deductions that perhaps were there for a reason. And because of this, not everyone's tax bill went down. Some people ended up paying more in taxes because these other tax deductions went away, something that they were used to. It did reduce estate taxes. Let debate on Thursday. It's actually Friday, not Thursday. Yeah, at the bottom. But of course, it had some effect on the Affordable Care Act. The individual mandate of the Affordable Care Act, just so you know, that's Obamacare, aka Obamacare. We're going to spend a whole week talking about healthcare, and someone's going to debate whether there should be universal healthcare, which goes way beyond just the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act was really meant to make healthcare affordable. It created these exchanges where, sort of everybody who wanted some insurance and everybody who was willing to supply was in this one market. And it did lower the number of uninsured people considerably. But we're going to debate later whether we should go even further and say everyone gets health care, universal. I think what we're going to talk about maybe, or what I would like to talk about right now is this idea here between, does it stimulate growth? And maybe these three, all three of these, because there's going to be a lot more added to the debt because of this. Why does a tax cut increase the debt? I hope everyone gets this. This is really simple and very important. If you cut taxes, you are causing the debt to go up. Is everyone real? Everyone gets that, right? And it's just for the simple reason that taxes, that's how the government gets its money. That's how it gets its funding. And if you're getting less taxes, you're not going to be able to pay for all of your things that you want to spend your money on. And in fact, you will just increase your debt. And the Congressional Budget Office estimated that it's about $1.5 trillion extra will be added to the debt because of this plan. So if we're going to argue it's worth it, oh, I have to sneeze. Excuse me. We should also talk about the consequences of this debt. Okay, stimulate growth. And I want you, as when you do your homework, to think about that. What's going to happen if we have a $1.5 trillion debt more than we would have otherwise had? Was it worth it? Does it stimulate growth? Anybody want to take a stab at this? Why would cutting taxes stimulate growth? Actually, I don't want to steal too much of the debate. We're going to talk about this on Friday, so let's not get too deep into the weeds right now. That's not what I want. I want you to get some idea for your homework. I want Ria to continue to prepare her argument. She's going to argue against the tax plan. I'm imagining she's going to say that the increase in the debt was not worth it, that it doesn't stimulate growth as much as the proponents of the plan say. Let's just talk real briefly now. How could it stimulate growth? Why does a tax cut stimulate economic growth? Is what we're talking about now. Can anybody even speculate why that might be the case? Who's going to grow the economy more than they otherwise would have because of this tax plan? Anybody? I have a weird comment, which is maybe we should ignore coronavirus. What do you think? So we could say, well, you can't ignore coronavirus. It's here. We're living in it. How could you ignore the coronavirus? The reason maybe our debate should should not focus on the effects of COVID-19 is because when this bill was passed, they didn't know about coronavirus. They weren't taking that into their consideration. I think that's a separate issue, which is, should there be a government stimulus to to help boost the economy during the pandemic? I actually wanted to have two separate debates, but nobody signed up for that one, for the stimulus one, so I just canceled it. We'll talk about that on our own, but we're not going to have a debate about the stimulus. Just for your background information, I'm sorry, I know I'm talking really quickly. We have had one round of coronavirus stimulus. It was roughly $1,200 per person. It was given to us back in, I don't know, April or May or something. And they're now debating a second round of stimulus. You know, you guys only got $1,200. You probably need more than that. Here's another round. But the Congress can't agree on that. So there may or may not be a second round of COVID money that you get. And that's an economic debate. I mean, current economic issues, that's like one of the most important current economic issues. What should we do to stimulate our economy so that the effects of the pandemic aren't really long lasting into some kind of a recession? Nobody wants us to go into a recession. Because, 10 years ago, we had a pretty bad one. We don't want another one. But okay, we'll talk about that later. When we talk about this particular tax cut, let's not pretend that the people knew there was going to be a coronavirus in 3 years, because they didn't. Let's talk about the economics behind the costs and the benefits of the policy. What are the costs of the policy? The debt went up, right? Maybe it's unfair. What, Ria, just give us a little preview. Are you gonna say that the tax plan was unfair? You're chatting now, aren't you? Yes. Rising inequality. Okay, we're gonna hear this on Friday, but I'm guessing she's gonna say that this tax plan increases the level of inequality in our country. And maybe are you going to argue? I'm trying to help you now. Get your argument good. Because if you just say inequality is bad and you stop there, that's not a great economic argument. That's a moral argument, isn't it? You're saying it's wrong to do something that increases the inequality of our country. We shouldn't be doing that. Maybe I personally agree with that a bit, but it's not a strong economic argument. What could you say about the economic consequences of inequality? Think about that. Think about, why is it bad for our economy to have a struggling working class, a working class that's struggling just to make their ends meet, and a wealthy class that just their income and their wealth just keeps growing without bound? Try to think about how you could argue that that's bad for the country. That's not just bad for the working class people. That's bad for everyone. One thing you could think about is efficiencies of. So what am I saying? You could think about. Well, here I'm gonna go straight into the weeds here. There's something called the marginal propensity to consume. Have you heard of this? I'm going to type it in the chat. Marginal propensity to consume. You guys know what the marginal propensity to consume is? I believe I'm saying it right, typing it. Do you know this concept? Somebody give me some yeses or some nos in the chats. No, Manuel says no. Thank you. Thank you for being honest. No. Okay. So I'm polling you right now. Diminishing marginal. It is similar. It is similar. Is that working class tend to stimulate the economy more than the rich people who tend to save more? Yes, yes, that is the consequence of it. But let me just give you kind of a definition of what the marginal propensity to consume is. I believe I'm saying it right. Okay, I'm not just making this term up, am I? Okay, I have a PhD in economics. I should know these things. Liability to spend in an economy based liability. Do you wait? What do you mean liability? Like how likely you are, or oh, likelihood? Uh, yeah, yes. But the word, okay, so let me give a good definition of it. I don't think I have it in the slides. What I'm really doing right now is trying to help Ria make a good argument here. I want her to win the debate. Um, I actually think there's not going to be anybody on the other side of the debate. Perhaps Colin is going to be on the other side. He's volunteered very valiantly. Colin says, I'll step in. If nobody else is, if the person who I've scheduled to do the debate is just a no-show, and I think that's a very real possibility. I think Colin has volunteered to, talk, and it'll have to be a little bit informal this first time. I'm not going to say, okay, Colin, you have 5 minutes, go, click. It will be a bit like we can all chip in a little bit. Okay, so how can we help Ria make a good economic argument that inequality is bad? And I think if you can use this marginal propensity to consume, it'll help you, because the idea, it is what Colin is saying. He's correct that the word marginal means if I take whatever your situation is currently and I add some money to you, I just hand you some money that you didn't have before. So I'm not talking about how do you spend the money that you already have, that you already earn. I'm saying excuse me, if for some reason I gave you an extra a certain amount of money, like a stimulus, an extra amount of money, what do you do with it? Do you save it? Do you spend it? Do you give it away? You put it in your mattress, so that's like the worst thing you can do. It's not being invested or consumed. It's literally just sitting in somebody's mattress somewhere. We don't want people to do that, actually. For the economy, that's bad. But the marginal propensity to consume is different for different people. You should think of that like for each dollar, how many cents do you spend versus save or something else? So marginal propensity to consume, let's say it's 0.8. If it's 0.8, that means for every, I'm not talking about all of your money. I'm not talking about how much do you spend of the money you earn. That would be average or something. I'm not talking about average. I'm talking about marginal. If I give you an extra dollar, if your MPC is 0.8, that means you spend 80 cents of that extra dollar. And what happens when you spend money? It goes to someone else who now has some more money that they can spend. And let's not forget, we live in a capitalist economy right now, which says that people only produce the goods and services that they think people will buy. I tell this all the time. If you do any sort of comparative economics studies and you think about the difference between a centralized economy and a decentralized economy, one of the huge, huge, huge benefits of a decentralized economy is that everything that people produce, you're making, somebody somewhere made these brains. I'm sorry, I keep going back to my brains. Somebody made this brain as like a juggling tool, and the reason they did it is because they thought somebody would want to buy it, that there was some demand, some utility that somebody would get from that. Okay, so why is it efficient maybe to have more inequality, less inequality, to have the people with lower wealth gain some spending, is because their marginal propensity to consume is higher on average. Of course, this could be different for different people, but their marginal propensity to consume, you could argue, is higher than the marginal propensity to consume of the richest people in this country. What will they do with their extra money? Probably save it, probably invest it. And in fact, Um, so I have that on here too, like stimulate growth, question mark. Some people think that actually when rich people have more money to save, that's really great for the economy because now they're going to invest that money, quote unquote, invest. I'm not so sure that they will though. We can think different things about it. I mean, I think it's fair to say that if somebody's investing a dollar versus spending that dollar, which one is better for the economy like right now? Which one will help the economy grow better right now? It's the spending. I'm not saying saving isn't important too, because saving and investment is always good for an economy because it, that's how people get funding for building factories and things like that. But if you're talking about which is better for the economy right now, which is more efficient in terms of our ability to produce goods and services that other people want to purchase, it's the spending, right? So you can make this argument that I don't want to just tell you the argument. I'm sorry, I spent way too long talking about this. But does everyone get that? Everyone who's got a homework coming up has to talk about something too. You're gonna have to think about that. We have about 0 minutes left. Um, yeah, I didn't here. Can I just quickly say what I would have maybe wanted to also say from this lecture, and that is there are some generally bad things about taxes. And check out my slides here. I have something about sales taxes, bad stuff. Something about income taxes, bad stuff. Something about corporate taxes, generally bad stuff. In the sense that taxes are not good, but they're necessary. And so people who are going to argue for more tax cuts, it's actually pretty easy to argue for tax cuts because we have all these facts that say taxes are bad because of deadweight loss. They're bad because of um, less disposable income. They're bad because of corporate incentives and whatever. I'm not, I don't want to ignore those. Those are going to exist too. So because the person who was arguing for the tax cut wasn't here, I didn't give that person any help. But it's there too. And we will talk about that on Friday. And if you want to do some research on your own, maybe you're somebody you're not really sure, you're undecided. Don't let me convince you of what to do. You can come up with your own opinion. Only thing I ask is that you base it in some economic principles, if you don't mind. You guys have any questions about the homework or about the debate? I should stop recording. Nobody wants to see that.